is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Our guys, at least from my experience, they love to hoop, and they know that this level is super competitive and there's a lot of good players out there. So they know that they have to work hard, and they learn a lot of self-motivation and time management. So I think that's one thing that if you like something or you love it, you got to work hard and try to be the best you can be in order for the team to be the best they can be. And I think that's why so many Division III athletes go on to succeed in whatever it is they do after college.
David Vogel is entering his third season as a men's basketball assistant coach at Ohio Wesleyan University. Vogel came to Ohio Wesleyan from Wittenberg University, where he served as an assistant men's basketball coach from 2020 to 2022. David began his coaching career at Texas Christian University, where he was a graduate assistant for 2 seasons and helped the Horned Frogs to a 23-14 record and a National Invitation Tournament semifinal appearance during the 2018-2019 season. Vogel is a 2018 graduate of DePauw University, where he was a 4-year letterman in basketball. During his undergraduate career, he helped the Tigers win the North Coast Athletic Conference tournament in 2015 and was a 3-time academic all-conference selection. Coach, do you have an old shooting machine sitting in your storage closet right now? If you do, our friends at Dr. Dish Basketball can help. Trade in your machine, any make or model, in any condition, even if it's a competitor's model, and get $4,000 off the Dr. Dish CT Plus, equipped with advanced stat tracking, competition-based training capabilities, and the industry's largest touchscreen. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Those are some great deals, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
This is Daniel Ginsberg with UTrain, the #1 booking app for basketball trainers, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering Hoopheads listeners 15% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code HHP15 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its Playbank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Get ready to take some notes as you listen to this episode with David Vogel, men's basketball assistant coach at Ohio Wesleyan University. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to be joined by David Vogel, men's basketball assistant coach at Ohio Wesleyan University. David, welcome to the Hoopheads pod.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to be here.
Thrilled to have you on. Looking forward to diving into your career, your basketball journey. Let's start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell me a little bit about how you fell in love with basketball and some of your first experiences that you remember.
Well, I was actually just with family on the 4th of July before I knew I was coming on. And they reminded me that my first word when I was a little kid was ball. So I think
nice.
That's kind of the first experience. And yeah, just grew up in a family with not just immediate family, but extended family too, where sports was pretty much all around. My sisters grew up playing a bunch of sports. My parents played in high school and college. And I pretty much played everything I could get my hands on growing up, mostly, basketball, baseball, football, and then really kind of started taking basketball, skill-wise a little more seriously. My family runs the McCracken basketball camp. My uncle still runs it. It's in its 62nd year. So started going to that when I was 5 or 6 and just kind of never stopped.
Was basketball always #1, or was there a time where one of the other sports was one of your favorites?
Yeah, it was definitely whichever one was in season. If it was spring, I thought I was Barry Bonds, and if it was, the fall, I thought I was Peyton Manning. So it's just probably basketball didn't really become #1 until probably just 8th grade, 9th grade.
Once it did, how'd you go about getting better, and how does the way you practice, the way you work, the way you try to become a better player, how do you think that differs from how kids today grow up in the game?
That's a really good question. Number one, didn't really have a trainer. I had a lot of great coaches and great people in my life who taught me a lot about the game. But when I was in the gym, my mom was actually an elementary school counselor. So we had a key to the gym, not a key to the lights. We had to, use the, the paper clip and get the lights in somehow. But we were able to get in there. And for the most part, it was just my mom rebounding for me or me just out on the driveway. My dad put some paint down and for the lane line, just really getting out there by yourself. I think that's one thing being kind of on the other side of things now is you don't see a lot of kids or hear about a lot of kids just going into the gym for an hour and getting a bunch of shots up on their own. So I think that was one thing we did a lot as kids is either just go down to your friend's house and play one-on-one or 21 or just go out on the driveway by yourself and try to make some shots.
It's definitely a lost art. You just don't see kids. And it goes to your other experiences that you talked about too, in terms of other sports. I say this all the time. Like I'll drive around my neighborhood on a sunny summer day and there's like nobody outside. Like I never see kids playing pickup baseball. Like my neighbor and I used to play one-on-one baseball, like in my backyard, just toss the ball up to yourself and hitting it. And you just don't see kids outside playing in the same way. And I always lament that on the podcast. I'm sure people are sick of hearing me say it, but it's just, I always feel bad for my kids that they didn't get that same experience of just kind of going out, and as you said, playing in the neighborhood and going down, playing basketball in the neighbor's driveway or going in the neighbor's backyard to play some football or baseball or whatever it is. And so it's just a different way of kind of growing up in the game and in sports that I don't think it's ever going to change and come back, but it's just the way it is at this point, David. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can still remember how many points I scored on my friend Jacob's driveway just as well as I can as the games in college. So just it's a different way to grow up for sure.
For sure. I used to grow up playing one-on-one too. I had a buddy that lived in town and we used to ride our bikes back and forth at each other's houses and we'd play one-on-one to 100. And now you tell kids that and they look at you and we're like, hey, yeah, we played outside. We played one-on-one to 100. And they look at you like you're insane. So
yeah, they think you're saying 100 seconds.
Exactly. Definitely a different world. All right. So tell me about your high school basketball experience. What's your favorite memory from playing high school ball?
So I was really lucky to play on a lot of good teams in high school. So in Indiana, we won sectionals all 4 years, which in Ohio, I believe that's the equivalent of districts. So played on a lot of really good teams. My sophomore year was definitely our best year. We made it to the state championship and lost, unfortunately. So I'd say definitely the best memory is semi-state. And in Indiana, it's its own weekend. So we actually lucked out and got to play about 20 minutes down the road. So we had our whole town there, small town Indiana. So that was cool. And, the best part about it was most of the guys that we played with, we grew up playing together since we were in third grade. So it was really cool to kind of look around and say, hey, I've been with this guy since we were, 9 years old and here we are about to make it to the state championship. So that's probably the best memory.
You weren't transferring, going to 6 different high schools. That wasn't in the plan.
It was not in the plan. First of all, at that point, I don't think you were able to do that. But I think my parents would have just said, all right, who are you going to live with and see you later. But no, they were really supportive. I think if it had come to that, maybe there wasn't a good program, we could have had the conversation. But we had a lot of good coaches, a lot of, people, not just for basketball. Our baseball teams throughout the years won state championships, football, girls basketball. So a lot of good people around the area and a lot of people who really take sports seriously. So it was kind of a perfect match.
When did college basketball get on your radar? When did you start thinking about maybe having a college career?
Well, my older sister played Division II at Urbana back when that was still a school. So I kind of got to see her kind of go through the whole recruiting process. And hers was a lot different than mine. She had some Division I, Division II interest, but got to see that. And then really, I'd say after sophomore year, kind of is when, you start to play. I think that was the first year we really traveled a little bit for AAU, going to Chicago and some other places like that. But I think that's kind of when I knew it could happen, or I thought it could happen. I thought at that point I was going to Indiana to play.
Right, of course, yeah.
As do, I'm sure, most kids. But I think it was probably around that time. And that's kind of when I started to hit a growth spurt a little bit as well, and definitely started to feel like I wanted to keep playing. I knew I didn't want to just, be done after high school.
When did you get a more realistic picture of where you could play? How old were you then?
It was the next year. It was junior year. We had a really good conference in high school, as well as a lot of other good players around the Fort Wayne, Indiana area. So just kind of seeing, guys who BJ Beecham went to Notre Dame, Caleb Swanigan, who obviously went to Purdue, a lot of other guys who played a lot in a lot of places. Just kind of realizing, hey, I can maybe compete with them a little bit, but it's a little bit different of a beast. And I actually got invited to a Division II elite camp. Thought I played really well. And then the guy they offered actually still plays in the G League. So it definitely was a little bit of a different beast for sure. And I had both my parents actually played at DePauw where I played. So I had a pretty good idea of how good or at least how good I thought Division III sports were.
So I'm assuming then that your parents helped in the decision that eventually led you to go to DePauw. But just what was your thought process for you as a player? And then I guess maybe to go along with that, how does that help you when you're talking to kids that you're recruiting?
Yeah, so my parents throughout the whole process were awesome. At first, because they both went there, I said absolutely not. I kind of wanted to do my own thing and go either maybe a little further from home, DePauw being about 2.5 hours. But I took a visit there at the end of my junior year and really liked it. I'm not sure how interested they were at that point, but we kind of both stayed in contact. And then I got to meet a lot of the players when I went back in the fall. That's kind of what sold it. And that's kind of what, on the other end of things now, doing a lot of recruiting at some stops I've been in now at OWU, is just how important your players are in terms of recruiting. Because you can talk to a kid until you're blue in the face about, what you think about the program, how you feel it should be. But when they get to meet the guys and hopefully spend, some time with them, not just 5 minutes, they can figure out pretty quick, in my opinion, hey, these are the guys I can see myself being with, not just on the floor, but, Tuesday night in the library or, Sunday afternoon hanging out. Like, I think that's a big thing that I realized, because when I went to DePauw on my last recruiting visit, met some really good guys, and that definitely sold me.
When you get there, what's the adjustment like for you academically, socially, basketball wise? What do you remember about your freshman year?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Adjustment is the right word. Academically, probably not too bad, because my first year in college, really liberal arts, you're kind of taking a variety of courses. So it's not really too specific, but on the basketball floor, talked about our high school teams being pretty good. We were good because we had a lot of good players and good coaches. We didn't necessarily have a really strict offensive or defensive system. So when I got to college and, the first day in practice, our coach is telling us to jump to the ball and, bounce back on a closeout. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. Maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did. So it was definitely an adjustment. And, we had a good team that year as well. And we started, I believe it was 5 seniors and some upperclassmen and a really good sophomore off the bench. So we had some good guys to learn from and kind of see, how to operate. So that was nice.
When you get to school, what's your thought process academically? Is coaching at this point at all on your radar? Or are you still thinking mostly like a player?
So I listened back to your episode with Shiva from Oberlin not too long ago. And I remember you talking kind of about the two different paths a lot of people take to get into coaching. Yep. I feel like I was probably more similar to, I always knew I wanted to stay within basketball, whatever that looked like. I wasn't sure. But my freshman year in college just was, kind of focused on getting good grades and trying to, get on the floor for basketball. And after my first semester, or right before it was over, my mom told me I couldn't come home until I saw the career counselor. Because I guess she was a little bit worried that I didn't quite have a direction, which she definitely was right. So I met with the guy. He was awesome. He was young, really energetic. At the end of the third session, he goes, "Hey, what do you think about being a basketball coach?" I'm like, "Well, I could have told you that, man." But then that kind of solidified it a little bit for me. And then it was kind of all I really wanted to do from there.
Were you thinking college coaching right from the start, or was there any thought to go on the high school coaching, teaching route?
Yeah, there was really no thought in my head in terms of level, whether that be high school, college, whatever that may be. I really always enjoyed school, so I thought teaching might be good, or maybe someday working my way up into the administration. But I got to work a lot of different camps in the summer in college, which was good advice I got from my college coach. Just try to meet a lot of people, and I was able to work some small college camps, Division I camps, and I really kind of fell in love with the process of, trying to just make things work in college. Cause I had a good college experience, and I kind of wanted to see if I could help some kids have that same kind of deal.
What was your favorite camp you went to, or who was the most influential person, coach, director that you met during that time when you were going to camps in the summer?
Well, I'd be remiss, and I think my family might disown me if I didn't say Todd Garman of the McCracken basketball camp, who I will say is my uncle. So he's known me since I was a little baby. But other than that, really, I'd say there's a lot of other people at McCracken who I got to, work with as counselors, or actually, be more of a player under. Mark Anderson, Gary Chupp, guys who coach at all different sorts of levels, high school levels, pro levels. Steve Case, who was a college coach for a long time. Those guys all helped a ton. And then one thing I'll never forget, and he has no idea, but I worked at Butler's camp when Ryan Pedon was there. And he pulled me aside one day and just started chatting after camp and said, "Hey, what do you want to do? And, who are you?" And he gave me some really good advice just on kind of how to go about not just going to camps, but networking while you're there, and not just networking to network, but really try to build some genuine relationships.
What did that advice look like? What were some of the things that he suggested?
He was really good and just told me, don't be afraid to reach out to people. And that's some of the best advice I've ever gotten is the worst thing you're going to do is either say no or not respond. And almost everybody you talk to is going to be willing to share some advice or something like that. And then also, don't close any doors. I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he basically said, you never know what opportunity is going to come up. And that was some of the best advice I've ever gotten is, you never really say never, especially as a young guy trying to get into coaching.
I can echo that, David, completely from this podcast. Like, it's very interesting when I think back to the beginning of this thing and kind of what we envisioned it back then versus what it's become. And then also just the idea that having this silly platform also just allows you to reach out and ask people, hey, would you want to come on? And the number of people that we've had on the podcast that otherwise trying to reach out to them feels like it would be almost an impossibility. But to your point, people are super willing to share. That's one of the things that it doesn't surprise me anymore. But when I first started, it definitely surprised me. A, the number of people that were just willing to come on when you reach out to them randomly. And then two, once they do come on, how willing people are to share. And I think that the coaching profession, although I think it's always been to that way to some degree, I do think that just because everything now is the video is just so widely available that you can't, even if you want to keep a secret about this or that or the other thing, it's almost impossible to do it anyway. So I think everybody has just kind of gone the other way where like, hey, you want to know something that we're doing or you want to learn about this or that. It's like, I'm an open book. And that's something that, again, it doesn't surprise me anymore, but it certainly surprised me in the early first year or two of the podcast. I was like, man, I can't believe this guy's coming on, or I can't believe this guy's talking about such and such. It just is, again, I think a testament to the kind of quality of people that we have in the coaching profession without question.
Yeah, no doubt. My college coach always used to say, it's a relationship business. And as college kids, we believed him, but, we always rolled our eyes a little bit. But, looking at it now, it is such a relationship business just because it's a hard thing to do. And you really need all the help you can get. And I mean that in a positive way. There's a lot of different ways to coach or help your guys. And I think that's one thing I've learned a lot too, is like you said, people are really willing to share things, but it's also, I've been surprised about how many different ways there are to do things. It's opened my eyes a lot, especially listening to the podcast or just watching clinics or videos on YouTube. Like there's a lot of different ways to be successful. So that's definitely something that's been interesting.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I'll go back to and kind of reference my own experience. So I think about when I got my very first coaching job. So I guess it was my second coaching job, because my first year when I graduated, I went back and I was helping out as like an assistant JV coach, kind of as a volunteer at my high school. And to be honest with you, I don't really remember too much about that experience at all. But then I do remember when I got my first sort of real coaching job where I was getting paid and I was a JV coach at Bay Village High School. And when I think about that and I think about who I was as a coach, like everything I did was either from my high school coach or my college coach. And other than that, to your point, I had no idea that there was any other way to do anything other than those two people who had coached me. That was all I knew. So any drill I did was from one of the two of them or whatever. And again, YouTube wasn't available at the time when I'm starting out. And I was one of those guys that probably was, based on who I was as a player, I was probably pretty arrogant about who I thought I was or could be as a coach. And so I probably didn't go back and, just like all the advice that guys give on this podcast about, you got to go out and really work on your craft and learn the game and get a mentor and do all these different things. And I kind of was just sort of in my own little cocoon of, hey, I know what I'm doing because I was a good player. But really, honestly, all I knew was the two guys that I had played under. And there's so much more, obviously, that's out there. And I think sometimes the sooner you learn that and the sooner that you understand there's way more different ways that you can be successful and start to try to tap into those, man, it just makes you, I think, that much better of a coach. And plus, it also helps you to kind of adopt, hey, this is how I want to play, or this is how I want to set up a program, or all these different things that when you haven't had that breadth of experience, it's almost impossible to know.
Yeah, it's definitely impossible. And like you said, the breadth of experience is huge. And that's why I feel like I've been pretty lucky to work at a few different places and move after a few years. Just learn from a lot of different people has been awesome. And like you said, not only on the court and how you want to play, but also how you want to run the program. We could talk probably about recruiting for 10 hours and how many different ways there are to do that. And I know they're all good, hopefully. But yeah, there's all sorts of different stuff that I feel like, me just having been in the profession for about 6 or 7 years, I don't think I'll ever stop learning. And that's probably one of the best things I've learned from my current boss, Mike DeWitt, who, if you haven't listened to his episode of this podcast from about maybe a little over a year ago, he'll talk about things much more eloquently than I will. But he's big on never stop learning. Whatever it is, whether it be X's and O's or culture, program philosophy, things like that. He's got, obviously we've got program standards and how we want to do things, but every year, if you watch us play over the past few years or his teams over the past 25, 30 years, you're not playing the exact same way year to year, and you're always trying to really get the best out of who you got.
Yeah, there's no doubt that I think the best coaches have an idea of, this is how we want to play and this is our standards, but then we also kind of look at, okay, what's our personnel look like? And then let's take this framework that we have and then shape that framework around the talent, the personnel that we have. And that's not easy to do. I mean, that takes a lot of experience. It takes an ability to adapt and look at what you have and then figure out, okay, what's the best way for this group to be coached and for this group to be able to win. And so that's something that, again, I think the best coaches do, but it's easy to say and it's a lot harder to do that. So looking back, when you got done at DePauw, what's the first job search for you look like? What's the process? What are you thinking as you graduate? What do you do? What are the first steps you take? Just kind of take me back to that moment.
Well, I feel like my first job search was very atypical of a typical coaching search. I'd met with my college coach in the fall of my senior year and kind of talking to him, all right, let's get some resumes together. Let's see, who might have an open job, things like that. But I actually got the job at TCU in October of my senior year, which I know now is very not normal. I kind of got a little bit, or I should say very lucky in how it happened. So I kind of knew I was going there for the whole senior year. And then I moved down to Texas pretty much a week after graduation. So it was definitely a whirlwind, but not probably your typical how you got a job story.
How does that happen?
So again, the small liberal arts college connection is one, and partially why I'm so passionate about small college athletics, D2, D3, JUCO, NAI, whatever it may be, is just kind of the relationships you build. So my mother, like I said, went to DePauw, and both my parents, huge influences on me, the best people and parents you could ever ask for. But she was actually, during the fall of my senior year, at a sorority reunion with her sorority sisters from DePauw. And one of her sorority sisters is the wife of TCU's chancellor. And when they got to talking, she asked, what does David want to do? And my mom probably said he has no clue. But I do think she said that, he wants to coach. And she said, well, we know Coach Dixon pretty well, and I know he's going to have a job or two open this year. Would David, want to interview? And my mom called me and asked if I knew who Jamie Dixon was. And I was kind of like, yeah, why are you asking me this? I just watched him on TV in the tournament last year, but, got down there for an interview probably a week later. I didn't realize it was an interview, to be completely honest with you. I thought I was just going down there just to meet them, kind of see how they did things and pick their brains a little bit. But I quickly realized that they were going to be the ones picking my brain. And it was really good. Got to meet them, and I have a ton of respect for Coach Dixon and the program, and did at the time too. And I remember at the end of the interview, I went to dinner with Coach Dixon and his family and one of our assistants at the time. And I'll never forget, he said, yeah, it seems like you know what you're doing. So, you want to work here next year. And I said, well, I can't believe you think I know what I'm doing. But so it was good. And he stuck his neck out for me, probably because he had to. But that was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And it got, outside of my comfort zone in a ton of different ways. And I learned probably more than you could count from Dixon and all the guys that we worked with at TCU.
All right. So you obviously are making a jump from being a player at the Division III level to coaching at the Division I level. So there's clearly an adjustment there. Tell me a little bit about what struck you, surprised you about Division I basketball compared to kind of what you had been through in Division III, and maybe what your perception of Division I was versus what it actually was when you showed up on campus.
Yeah, that's a really good question. During my senior year in college, our assistant coach at DePauw helped me a lot with Marcus Bledsoe, helped me a ton with video and kind of maybe what I might get into at TCU. So I had a bit of a jump start, but it quickly, I quickly realized that it's 24/7, 365. And I knew it'd be a lot of work, but I had no clue the amount of work that it took, not just one person in the program, but everybody in the program to try to be successful. And at TCU, and I'm sure it's similar, maybe a little different, but pretty similar in most Division I schools, most people have kind of their own specialty. I was a graduate assistant. We had a couple other guys who were really good, but all of us were a little different. So at the time, I was also the video coordinator. And I don't know why, but they made me the graphic design coordinator with no, but so I quickly, and I got a lot of help learning all this stuff. Our operations director, I don't think I would have made it if it wasn't for our operations director at the time. Thomas was unbelievable, not just at his job, but he was able to kind of tell us, hey, here's how you should do things. And then he gave us a ton of responsibility, kind of let us run wild with it. But yeah, it definitely struck me how much of a business and how 24/7 it was, not just on the floor, but in everything you have to do off the floor as well.
How long did it take you to grasp the video side of it to where you felt like, hey, now I kind of really do know what I'm doing instead of just kind of fake it till you make it?
It definitely was a lot of fake it till you make it at the beginning. I know that the first week I was there, or maybe it was, the second week I was there, we had started summer practice and we're in the film room, and I'm up front kind of, obviously not talking during the film session, but kind of just making sure everything's up there. And coach asked for a certain clip and I didn't have it. And that's not a good thing. So definitely, I'd say after the first month, I kind of had a pretty good grasp. A lot of sports code is what we were using at the time. And obviously some synergy things in there as well, but definitely the first month, one of our other GAs had Chris Jones had used it before and helped me quite a bit as well. So I think that's the first thing I realized is, you have to be technically proficient, but then it doesn't really stop after that. There's obviously, when you're watching film, it's good to be able to clip it up and have it ready for coaches. But if you really want to make yourself a little bit more indispensable, it's good to know how to watch film. And that's probably the one thing I learned from Coach Dixon the most, and is just how to watch film and what to look for and how to see it. And then not only that, but how to, communicate it to the players. So I don't know if I still have a grasp on that, but that part's definitely, I think, going to be a lifelong kind of journey, which is one of my favorite parts. And I could watch video for hours. So.
Yeah, being able to watch it and understand what you're seeing and what you're looking at, I think is probably a super underrated skill. And it's probably something that I think that a lot of young coaches don't necessarily realize what goes into that when you really sit down and start looking at film and trying to figure it out. I know even when I'm watching film with Cal and trying to do that, and we're looking at stuff, and it's kind of just it's a process. It's a process of trying to sit down and be like, okay, like what are we looking for here? And are we looking for, and again, when you're looking at it as a coach, a lot of times you're looking at the whole picture. And then when I'm watching it with one individual player, it's a little different when you're kind of focused in on one person. So there's definitely, without question, I think that learning curve piece that, yeah, it takes a little bit of time to know what to look for. And obviously you have a good mentor and somebody that's willing to sit down with you and take you through that. It accelerates your learning curve as opposed to you just kind of sitting down and trying to fly blind, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the one thing like that you hit the nail on the head with is it's different, watching film as a team as opposed to an individual. And I think it's great to send whatever level you're at, send players film and, give them full game film, of course. But, send them clips. But I know when I played, if our coaches send us film, I'd watch it, but I'm probably mostly just watching myself and thinking, oh, that's a great look. That's a great looking jump shot. And I'm not probably critiquing myself. So I think one of the worst things in my limited experience that I could do, especially as an assistant now, where, you're able to kind of actually get with the players and watch film with them, is just send them film and say, hey, go watch this. Let me know what you think. Instead, hey, watch this film. How do you feel like you rebounded or why box outs, things like that? You could go on and on, but I think that's a huge thing of player development is, like you said, knowing what to watch and then being able to accept it as well, and being able to accept it and then adapt on the court is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. During your time there at TCU, how did you balance going to school and getting your master's while you're also trying to coach at the level of intensity that we know Division I basketball requires?
Yeah, it was a challenge at first. That first summer you're down there, you're trying to work 12 hours a day and then go to class. But I was really lucky to have both, head coach, assistant coaches at TCU, and also professors that understood that, you can't really do your job as a GA without going to school, and vice versa. We were there for more of the basketball, but the education is important as well. So it was really a balance. I know a lot of the guys did, online classes, but my program was in person. So usually about 3 nights a week, it's either 6 to 8:30 or 5 to 8 classes at night. So you kind of had to be on your stuff and make sure that when you get home, you're trying not to burn the candle at both ends and you're getting some sleep. And that probably doesn't happen as much as it should, but you can't have one without the other. And that's one reason why I loved it is I got to learn a lot on the court and in the classroom. So it was awesome.
Over the past 2 AAU seasons, both my son's team and my daughter's team have used Game Changer. It's simply the best basketball team app. We used it to live stream games for parents and grandparents that weren't able to make the games in person. We used it for coaching video. We used it to track both team and individual statistics. And it's so incredibly easy to use, you'll be blown away. Download Game Changer now and start using it with your team. When you finish with that part of the program and you're now in a position where you got your master's degree and it's time to figure out, okay, what's the next step? What were you thinking at that point? What was your process for going through and trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do next? Are you now focused on, hey, this level, Division I, feels like the right level for me? Are you feeling like, hey, I'd like to take a look at some other levels? Are you just thinking, hey, I just need to get a job that pays me a salary? Kind of where are you at that point?
Yeah, that was probably rule number one, was probably try to make a little bit more money. Although at TCU, they treated us extremely, extremely well. But I knew the one thing I wanted was to get closer to home. I loved living in Texas, but I was really far from family and friends, and I definitely wanted to be closer to them. I've got 2 older sisters, and they were starting to have kids around that time, and cousins as well. And I knew I wanted to get closer to home, so that was kind of rule number one. So I graduated in May of 2020 with my master's. So that was right during the heat of COVID. And but before that, I this might sound weird, but because I loved the video aspect so much, and we had a GA who was a year kind of ahead of me in the program. He went on, and now still works for Utah Jazz, but he went on to Utah Jazz kind of in a video player development role. And that was something that really intrigued me. So I was open to trying that. And then also like what I'm doing now, small college. I know those are 2 vastly different things, but I either kind of wanted to be on the video side or do kind of what we're doing now and have your hand in a little bit of everything. But yeah, May of 2020, you're kind of just trying to survive. And I don't mean to make a joke about that, but really just trying to, just graduate and then see what's up. So I moved from Texas back home with my parents and really just started applying to any coaching job at any level that came open. I was a finalist for a couple high school jobs, actually got offered one. And then I was a finalist for another small college assistant coaching job. But I was really fortunate to get the Wittenberg part-time assistant job in late June or early July of that year. And that was it couldn't have been a better timing and situation. So yeah, it worked out well that it was something that I wanted to be doing. But at that point, honestly, probably would have just coached anybody, anywhere, as long as I was able to make it a profession.
So when you get that job, what's it like coaching with all the COVID restrictions compared to the experience that you had just come out of? Obviously, the end of your season in 2020 gets affected by COVID, but where are you guys at Wittenberg wise in terms of just what does that look like when you come on board?
Well, before I had gotten there in 2019, 2020, Wittenberg was, I can't remember the exact record, but it might have been like close to 28-2, and they were going into the Sweet 16 to play Mount Union. And the season got canceled right before that game. And they'd been really good for a few years before that, even when I played too. So they were rolling, and it definitely took the wind out of the sails, of a lot of the guys that were graduating in that class. I've gotten to know quite a few of them, and they're good dudes. But we were in a weird spot, and I know it wasn't just us; it was everybody. So that summer, though, fortunately, Indiana still hosted a ton of AU tournaments, so we were still able to get out on the recruiting trail, mostly in Fort Wayne, a little bit in Indianapolis. So we were able to get a real kind of recruiting AU experience, even though things were locked down. But we did that, and then in the fall, the COVID rules, you're able to do a lot more individual workouts, and there was all masks, and it was a whole deal. But that was good for me, just because a typical fall in Division III, now we get the 8 days, but then it was, normally you start practice October 15th. So as a new assistant and as a guy who's really coaching for the first time during those small group workouts, Coach Croce, Matt Croce, gave our head assistant and I and our GA a lot of responsibility during those to actually coach and teach and do a lot of things. So that was a great experience for me, even though it probably was not a great experience for small college athletics everywhere. So it was definitely a mess, but I know that everybody was affected by it. So I'm glad that's hopefully in the past.
Immediate differences between being part of a Division I staff and I'm assuming the specificity of what you were assigned to do versus sort of the do everything position that you typically get when you're coaching at the Division III. How did you sort of adjust to that?
I loved it, to be honest with you. I still got to do a lot of the video and a lot of the, the behind the scenes stuff, but my favorite thing, and still is just being on the court with the guys and being able to actually, hey, if you see something, you're actually now kind of able to say it and try to help them get where they want to go and get where we want to go as a team. But definitely took a little adjusting in terms of just being super organized. That was probably what helped. I feel like my first, and still helps as I'm still kind of learning and growing in this, but being super organized, making lists and kind of dividing your list into different categories. You got what you need to do for recruiting, what you need to do for kind of the operations side, what you need to do for, XYZ throughout the week or the month. And that's kind of how I feel like we all did it at that level, which was nice. And some of the best things I've ever read, I think it's Mandy Green, who I subscribe to her newsletter. She always talks about, one day focus, kind of try to go all in on recruiting. And I know she's not listening to this, but I'm going to butcher it. She writes it a lot better than what I'm saying. But, instead of trying to do 50 different things in one day, pick 2 or 3 things that you're really going to focus on and grind on for 4 or 5 hours. So that way, you've got that done, and now you don't feel like you're grasping at straws. And that took me a long time to learn, is trying not to spin your wheels, because especially at the D3 level, you could always be out recruiting. There's not really any restrictions on that. And in college athletics, there's always something you could probably be doing. So just prioritizing that was a big adjustment from previous experiences.
What advice do you have for a coach who's starting out like you were and you're on a part-time salary? How'd you make ends meet? How'd you just make your life work under that circumstance?
Well, I was really lucky. Our head coach, he was unbelievable. Croce was great with kind of allowing me and all of us to kind of, especially during COVID, didn't really have a choice because we weren't doing a whole lot. But even in my second year there, when things were close to being back to normal, I substitute taught probably 3 or 4 days a week just in the Springfield schools. And he was great with kind of knowing that in order to, keep a roof and do things like that, I had to do that. But he was great with just, as long as you got your stuff done and you've contacted your recruits and film's done, of course you can get that going. So advice I'd have is just try to find something that you can make work, and just be really honest and communicate with whoever it is, whether it's your boss or people that you're working with outside of basketball. Just before you start and even as you're working, just be honest, try to communicate as best you can. And I think the honesty will help build trust. And that's the biggest thing, I think, in a staff and in an organization, is just the trust, knowing that you're there for the right reasons and that you're going to do what you do and do it in the time you're going to say it in.
From Wittenberg, how does the opportunity at Ohio Wesleyan come across your desk?
So that one was good. I knew that their assistant was leaving. I had actually seen him at a AU tournament and had kind of heard that he might be out. And Coach DeWitt just reached out, gauging interest, and I know he reached out to a few people. And it was hard to leave Wittenberg. I loved it there. I loved all the guys, loved, where we were. And I thought that we were starting to, and they're doing a great job now. But I thought, at the time we were starting to kind of build it back out of the COVID kind of rut. But DeWitt, full-time position. So that was huge, for a lot of different reasons. And like we've kind of talked about earlier, I knew that it was going to be another opportunity to learn from another really, really, really good coach. I coached DeWitt's teams when I played in college were every year in the NCAA tournament with a ton of good players. So I knew that it'd be an opportunity to try something different, because I feel like I still have a ton to learn and I always will. But at that time, I felt like I was kind of ready for a new challenge, and it was an exciting one. So I went down there and interviewed, and I thought the in-person interview went pretty well and was able to get the job.
Coming into your time at Ohio Wesleyan, what do you feel like were your strengths as a coach? And then what do you feel like you've really improved in the time since you've gotten there?
Strengths as a coach, I feel like would be one that I feel like I really did well at the beginning was just communicating with the guys. I don't know if they were, but in my head, I was worried that they'd be hesitant from, a coach coming from in the conference. And at Wittenberg, we had beaten Ohio Wesleyan my second year right before I went. So I was worried that there might be some animosity, but they welcomed me with open arms. So I think the strength was just building the relationships with the guys, getting to know them off the floor before kind of the season started, just trying to be around, study tables, things like that, meetings, all that kind of stuff. And I think that was one thing that helped me, at least. I don't know if it helped them at all, but it helped me feel more comfortable there. It definitely helped me kind of grow as a coach in terms of, at OU, currently our only assistant coach. We've had a few good, student assistants and managers and things like that, but really helped me take on more responsibility. And then one thing I feel like I've gotten better at is the recruiting aspect of just kind of making sure you're telling a story, and that story just being as authentic as you possibly can to the vision that your head coach, in this case, Coach DeWitt, it wants to tell, and what he wants the program to be about. And you're not going after just grasping straws. You're going after the right kids and trying to figure out, who's going to fit and are they interested. And I think that's one thing. At my first few years, I just thought recruiting was you got to go, persuade kids who have no possible interest, and that's still part of it. You got to get the ones who, persuade them even if they're not the top choice. But I think that's one thing, is being a little bit more selective and making sure you're spending time on the right guys. And it's not always going to work out, but definitely I feel like it's helped us over the last few years.
Is that a balance between your conversations with Coach DeWitt and kind of talking to him about what he wants, what he's looking for, and then also just kind of your own intuition of being around the guys that you do have who seem to have success, and then just getting to know the institution better?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. From year one to year two, I feel like my first year I had a decent grasp of what Ohio Wesleyan's about, but now after being there for a year and now 2 years, definitely have a bit of more of an idea of who might succeed there. And I feel like a lot of different kinds of kids can, which is great. We've got kids from all different backgrounds, all different, mostly Ohio, but even some kids from out of state, all different parts of Ohio. So yeah, it's definitely knowing a little bit more about the school, and then being around our guys, seeing how they interact, then talking to a recruit, seeing how they interact with maybe some of their high school teammates or AAU teammates. And that's just both Coach DeWitt and I both going out and seeing kids in their high school setting, talking to their coaches, talking to their families, especially if they come on a visit. And chances are, if you don't have a good feeling about somebody, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. They just might not be the right fit. And at the end of the day, that's pretty much the name of the game. And in my opinion, is fit over everything almost.
Yeah, it's funny just, again, seeing it from a parent perspective. And obviously, full disclosure here for anybody who isn't aware, my son Cal is going to be going in with Coach Vogel and Coach DeWitt at Ohio Wesleyan this fall. So we're super excited about that. And again, obviously, we got to see what the recruiting process looked like on the parent/player side. And I will say that just going through it, it is interesting to see the different ways that different coaching staffs recruit and communicate. And I think one of the things that you and Coach DeWitt, your program, did very well was to help us and to help Cal understand exactly what he was looking at and why the program from a basketball standpoint and why the school from an academic standpoint would be a good fit. I know when we went down and had our visit and got an opportunity to walk around campus with a couple of the guys from the team, made a big difference for Cal to be able to see those guys. And obviously you're going to spend a lot of time with you and Coach DeWitt, but you're still also going to spend a lot of time with the guys who are part of the team. And as you well know, a lot of those guys are going to become your lifelong friends. And so that becomes a big part of, what that decision looks like. And so it is interesting just when you start talking about recruiting and being able to identify who fits where, and you guys are trying to find the right fit for your program. And then conversely, looking at it from our perspective as a parent, a player, you're trying to find what's the right fit for our son academically, what's the right fit for our son basketball wise, what's the right fit with the relationship with the coaching staff. And so there's all these factors that it's just so interesting. When I think back to my own experience, it was so different just in terms of I was like, I want to play Division I basketball, and everything else was kind of almost irrelevant. I never once thought about hey, I wonder what majors they have, or I wonder about this professor or this program. It was just I just had one singular thing in mind, and that was it. And so then when my kids and my older daughter, who wasn't a basketball player, trying to give them advice about, hey, this is what you should think about or whatever, I'm like, well, I kind of just got to go with my parent hat here, because when I was a kid, my decision was not based on any of the stuff that you guys are basing your decisions on. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, and yeah, again, we're super excited about Cal and having him and the family be part of the program. So that's definitely something that I wasn't sure if we talk about that or not, but I was going to let you bring it up for sure. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting, kind of like what you said, is what decisions are based on, and hopefully decisions at the Division III level are based on the academics, the people that you meet, and then the basketball program. But I think one thing that gets lost a little bit in recruiting is just every person's different. And you might have a kid that comes to campus and you really like him, and he might talk about the travel abroad program for a half hour. It's kind of up to the coaching staff, whoever's there at the time, or the players, if they bring it up to you, hey, in a couple months or in a few weeks, send him some information about that. Number one, because he's interested. Number two, because it shows that you were actually listening. And I think it's definitely something that, the recruiting process, and I get asked sometimes, and I've only been doing this for a few years, and I know that there's a lot of other people out there who have been doing this a lot longer than me, but I get asked sometimes, what does the recruiting process look like, and how does it look like at your school? And I think if you talk to any small college coach on the podcast, every school's is way different from the other in terms of timeline, how the coaches communicate, like you said. So I think it's just good for to run your own race as a coach and as a family, and then hopefully find the right fit from there.
I think to me the most interesting question that I always like to ask about recruiting is where does your initial list of guys come from? How do you even begin to? I mean, again, you go out and you're at an AAU tournament with, God knows how many players and teams and levels and all this different stuff. And it always feels like you're kind of walking around. And then obviously you as a coach, you have a better understanding of who you think can play at your level. And so you're able to kind of discern that. But it always is amazing to me when you start thinking about just the sheer number of kids that are out there playing, whether it's AAU or high school basketball, and to just kind of figure out okay, here's 50 dudes that we got to check out. And then we got to start to narrow that down with some of the other things that we talked about. But it's always that initial list question that I guess is interesting to me. So where do you guys come up with the initial list of, hey, these are some guys we at least got to take a look at on film, or we got to go see them in a tournament, or somebody catches your eye? Just what's the process for just kind of starting for somebody that gets on the radar?
Yeah, this might be a cop-out of an answer, but I'd say anywhere and everywhere. There's not really one way, I feel like, at least for us, and we might be similar or different to some other schools, I'm not sure, but we can find out about guys through a ton of different ways. Coach DeWitt, having been at Ohio Wesleyan for a good amount of time, he's so well connected in Ohio, especially Central Ohio. So he's got great relationships with high school coaches, club coaches, and that's a huge asset for us. So that's a big one. AAU, obviously, I think it's hard to just go into an AAU tournament, kind of like you said, because there's a lot going on. But it's hard to go in just blind. You got to have a little bit of a plan, whether it's a kid you've heard about or an Ohio team, and you just got to, throughout the coaching staff, split it up, and that's kind of the time commitment that it takes. But that's also the fun part, is trying to find kids that diamonds in the rough, or try to go win some recruiting battles. So yeah, I think it's definitely can kind of come from anywhere. They might send you an email. You might have heard about them from maybe their brother or sister goes to Ohio Wesleyan, things like that. And I think that's how the initial list looks. And I think people would be surprised about how big initial lists are for small colleges. And I've talked to a few other coaches about that. It's a big number, but you have to have that big number in order to whittle it down and get to that final number, however many kids you feel like you need to bring in. And it's not going to be perfect every year, just with the nature of Division III recruiting. But I think one thing that is helpful is to never just stick to that initial list. And I know I did that my first year at Wittenberg, is just you had your initial list after AU and you never really talked to anybody else throughout the year. So you got to have that initial list. But if someone emails you in November, or you see a kid play in February and he's pretty good, it's okay to add some kids later if they're the ones that are the best fit, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, it's always right. You can't, as wide as the net is, and as much as there's social media and video and the amount of time that you guys are out on the road, there's still guys that I'm sure all of a sudden they're like, hey, where'd this guy come from? Or he switches AAU teams to maybe playing with a better group, and it was a team that you hadn't watched before, all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it makes sense to be able to, again, flexibility, right? You want to find the right guys that are the right fit. And maybe that happens in the summer, maybe it happens on into the fall, and you got to be ready and willing to adjust to find the right people for the program. How do you guys divide up responsibilities, or what's the conversation like between you and Coach DeWitt in terms of what your responsibilities are versus what his responsibilities are?
So that's a good question. I mean, I feel like that just like we talked about, just kind of goes. At least when I first got hired at Ohio Wesleyan, we just kind of had a conversation. It was pretty organic. We didn't really, I don't think, set a meeting time to talk about what every responsibility was, but he was pretty good about, hey, you're the recruiting coordinator, things like that. And then he does obviously our scheduling. He does more than I feel like a lot of than he probably should, just because he likes to have a hand in a lot. He does an awesome job. So that's again awesome to work for a guy like that. But no, I mean, I think it just depends on the program. But for us, just kind of talking about, I think it's, hey, have you done this, or have you done this, or hey, coach, especially me asking him, hey, what do you need, or hey, where do you need help with this, or things like that. So it just kind of is a conversation, and that's kind of where the communication piece comes in, and that's the good part about we obviously have a really small staff, and you know who to go to if you've got a question, or if I didn't do something. If I didn't do something, he knows that I was the one that didn't do it, so I better get it done. Go. So yeah.
All right. So what part of it, maybe compared to, let's say, the Division I side, where you were a little bit more focused, what's something that you get to do in Division III that you didn't do in Division I that you really enjoy, that maybe surprised you?
I would say one thing would be just dealing with probably more people on campus. At TCU, such a big staff, and our men's and women's basketball offices were pretty sequestered from most of the other people in the athletic department. So I don't feel like I did a very good job of, going out and, obviously you get to meet people from being in the building and going to some other games and everything like that. But I feel like being at the small school level, it's much more of a whole campus community, if that makes sense. Like, if you've got a question for an admissions counselor, chances are you've either got their phone number or you know where their office is. You can just go down and talk to them. Or if, somebody in financial aid, if, with the whole FAFSA thing happened this year. And I definitely enjoyed getting out on campus and getting to know more people, as opposed to just kind of being with the basketball program. And I didn't really realize that I didn't do that before, if that makes sense. I think that's one thing, that I've enjoyed, is just getting to know more people, and more people in the athletic department as well. You got a little bit more time at the small college level to go to some other games, go to whatever teams are playing in the fall or in the spring. And it's nice. A lot of our men's and women's basketball games are either double headers or kind of around the same time. So you get to see a lot of the other student athletes compete and get to see how all the other coaches are doing as well.
When you think about the Division III athletic experience, both for you and for the guys that you coached, what do you think is the biggest benefit, or the thing that makes the Division III athletic experience so unique?
Well, I think a lot of it is, at our level, there's no scholarships, and there might be some, but there's not much NIL. So the kids, the guys and the girls, they're doing it because they love it and because they want to, not because it's gonna. And there's a lot of kids at the higher levels that do that as well, and I'm not besmirching that at all. But our guys, at least from my experience, they love to hoop, and they know that this level is super competitive, and there's a lot of good players out there. So they know that, because they love it and they want to be good at it, they have to work hard, and they learn a lot of self-motivation and time management. So I think that's one thing that, if you like something or you love it, you got to work hard and try to be the best you can be in order for the team to be the best they can be. And I think that's why so many Division III athletes go on to succeed in whatever it is they do after college.
You read the D3 book, Pipeline to the Pros. Did you read that yet?
I haven't yet. It's on the list, but I have not read it. Have you?
Yeah, it's good. You should definitely read it. It's really well done, and you will definitely enjoy it. And it speaks to, I think, kind of just what you just described, that the things that you learn, I think, as a Division III athlete in terms of just integrating yourself into campus and being a part of that, that aspect of it, that, Division I, you're spending so much time with athletics and with your teammates that you don't necessarily integrate out into the greater campus in the same way. And I just think that a lot of the stories in that book are again, really interesting from a perspective of, hey, why are these guys so successful? And obviously this book focused on guys going from D3 to the NBA and executive and coaching roles and that kind of thing. So I think it's a book that if you haven't gotten a chance, not just you, but anybody out there, if you haven't had a chance to read the book, it's really well done. You would really enjoy it. Before we finish up, I want to ask you a 2-part question. So part 1, when you look ahead over the next year or two, what do you see as being your biggest challenge? And then number 2, when you think about what you get to do every single day, what brings you the most joy? So your biggest challenge first, and then your biggest joy.
So I think our biggest challenge is probably just getting back to the level that we want to get to. Being, Ohio Wesleyan's got a rich tradition in men's basketball, and a couple of years ago we were tied for second in the league, and this year didn't quite have as good of a year as we want. And the league, I feel like, is going to be probably even stronger than what it was. There's a ton of good teams, players, and coaches, so it's going to be a dogfight for sure. And I think our challenge is just putting our guys in the right position and to be successful, because we've got a lot of good guys and good players, and we know they're going to work hard, which is awesome. We don't really have to worry about that. So kind of trying to put them in the best position to succeed and try to win some championships, because that's what we definitely want to do. And then I feel like what brings me the most joy is just, again, the guys and working with Coach DeWitt, working with the guys, just really fires me up to kind of be around them and see them succeed. And I think the thing that now, having gone through coaching it long enough to where some guys are, either still playing or, in the working world, seeing them succeed and do that kind of stuff too is just as fun as seeing them, make a huge 3 or something like that, because that's what it's really all about. And it's just fun building the relationships and seeing, guys do what they want to do and have fun doing it.
All right. Before we get out, share how people can get in touch with you, social media, email, whatever, find out more about the program at Ohio Wesleyan. And after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
For sure, yeah. Email is probably the best way. DA Vogel, VOGEL @owu.edu. That's probably the best way to get in touch. Social media, my Twitter is David Vogel 22. I'm probably not as good as at responding to DMs as I should be, but get in touch with me there. And then, yeah, I'd love to hear from you and see if we can talk some hoops.
David, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight and being flexible. Really appreciate that. And to everyone out there, well, I guess before I say to everyone out there, we will be seeing a lot of each other, hopefully, over the next 4 years, and definitely looking forward to that and coming down a lot to campus and seeing Cal be a part of the team. So, again, thank you for that, and looking forward to those next 4 years. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.